I don't know what they're smoking over there at Princeton.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive for any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do the show on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific right here on Twitch. Twitch.tv/Echoplex Media, simulcasting to a couple other places, but fucking don't worry about those other places. Twitch is the right place to watch this show. Looks like my co-host tonight is my favorite co-host, myself. HK is out on adventures. Maybe he'll join us during Red Light. Who fucking knows? But yesterday, I don't know if anybody was aware, yesterday there was an emergency, everybody. There was a fucking emergency. There was an emergency debate about whether or not universities are doomed with Peter Boghossian, Kathleen Stock, and whoever the fuck James Orr is. So it's an emergency. This is on the UnHerd podcast. That's spelled UnHerd like HERD, so that it's a double. They're clever over there. You can figure out what the clever thing they're doing is. Obviously, they're just so clever, so fucking clever. So without any further ado, let's see what the emergency is.
Flo, how's the evening gonna take place?
Hi everybody, welcome back to the UnHerd Club, or welcome if it's your first.
Can we get her my microphone?
I commend you, battling Storm Jocelyn, to reach us here on Old Queen Street. And as you can see, we are a very full house tonight, extremely full in fact. This event sold out perhaps quicker than any event we've ever had before. So thank you for all getting here, and do make space for the person next to you if they're looking a little squashed. Just some housekeeping before we begin. Before Freddie introduces our esteemed guests, I just wanted to say that the bar will be open in the interval of this show, which will last about 15 minutes for you to go and get a drink after about 45 minutes of chat between all of us here. And then the restaurant downstairs is open after if you want some delicious food. It is available there until late, so do come and join us.
Fire the sound guy or gal. Fire the sound person.
The voiceless tonight, and be keeping a close eye on the words of our subscribers.
Fire whoever's playing with their microphone.
They will have their own questions and comments, which hopefully I'll be able to chip in with, and we can keep the ball rolling with both you lovely people in person and also the thousands of people joining across the World Wide Web. It's subscriber only for people asking questions, and so even more reason to become a member of the UnHerd family if you haven't already subscribed.
Don't give UnHerd your money, give me your money.
And with that, I will leave you in the capable hands of Freddie Sayers.
Thank you, and welcome once again, everyone. This is our first emergency debate.
Why is this an emergency? I just don't know. What is the emergency?
You might ask. We've known that there are issues to do with the universities for some time. It felt to us like the departure of Claudine Gay and Liz McGill, the presidents of two of the top Ivy League colleges in the US was somehow a significant moment, because it meant that rather than there being kind of grumbles from groups about the issues in university campuses, whether they are free speech, whether they are strange ideologies stalking the campuses, whether it's DEI, whether it's mob culture, whatever your particular issue of concern, suddenly, literally the presidents of two of the top universities in the world had to resign. So we had to ask the question, how bad has it got?
There were two women of color, by the way.
Crucible of our culture, taking forward the best. Have they somehow been lost? Have they been captured? And what can we do about it? We have gathered at this short notice three people who have very close experience of exactly these issues. They are all philosophers, as it happens, which we'll probably talk about. All academic renegades of some kind.
This is Peter Boghossian, who quit his job of his own accord at, I believe it was the University of Oregon. Claimed to have been canceled, and then after he quit his job, everybody was like, that guy wasn't very nice. Like, like other staff, like not like faculty either. They're just like fucking support staff when it came out. We're like, that guy was kind of an asshole. It's Kathleen Stock in the middle, who nobody knew her name until she like had to dig her heels in on some transphobic shit. And she could have just been like, oh, okay, that's fine. But no, she had to go get canceled because that's lucrative. And then I don't know who the guy over here, the third guy, the guy's just to the right of the center is. I have no idea who he is. But I loved his soap opera.
Peter Boghossian was the assistant professor of philosophy at Portland State University until he was forced out by campus politics.
He quit.
Most famous, I should say, for a series of hoax academic papers that he put together with some colleagues, which he submitted to highly prestigious academic peer-reviewed journals.
And on the one that I covered, that peer-reviewed journal rejected the paper, and so they put it in a pay-to-play journal and then didn't pay the fee.
And many of them got published. Titles included Rape Culture and Queer Performativity at the Dog Park, The Conceptual Penis as a Social Construct.
That's the one that I wrote the article on, that they did not get published. And in a regular journal, they got published in a pay-to-play journal and then didn't pay the fee. Assholes.
And an ethnography of breastaurant masculinity. These all got the thumbs up from the Academy, so he can.
No, they didn't.
Welcome, Pete. Kathleen Stock is a former professor of philosophy at the University of Sussex, author of the bestseller Material Girls, and most importantly for us, star columnist here at UnHerd. She also was pushed out of her position at Sussex in 2020.
She was mean
because of her writing.
How mean to people.
Sex and gender. And James Orr is. And this is crucial. He's still got it.
Fired me already.
Assistant Professor of Philosophy of Religion at the University of Cambridge. And that is actually crucial because he is our insider tonight. He is going to report from inside the Citadel as to whether the situation can...
So where's the debate? Wait a minute. Is the guy that's sitting to the right of the center, is he going to take the position that things are not as bad as they seem and that these people they're screaming that the sky is falling?
So really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. James, I thought the simplest place to start, the rough format, as Flo mentioned, is we'll talk for the first 45 minutes or so. There'll be a short break, and then all of your questions, we will get involved after that. Let's start in our bit by identifying the problem, and then we can see if we think it's solvable or not. Pete, that extraordinary experience you had, getting all of those, what frankly sound like crazy papers published.
Yeah.
What did you learn from it, and how bad is the situation?
He learned that you don't have to actually pay the fee at a pay-to-play journal.
Well, the situation is that the peer-reviewed academic literature is corrupt. There's a wide-scale institutional and organizational.
The other question is something got published, but what was the peer review like on the things that were published in the non-pay-to-play journals? Like they never bring this up. What if the peer review was scathing?
The source of that corruption are activist disciplines that are not interested in truth. They're not putting forth ideas that are falsifiable, capable of being shown false, but they want to push a narrative. They want to push ideas about race, gender, sexual orientation, trans status, etc. So tonight we're going to primarily talk about plagiarism. And yes, plagiarism is a kind of fraud, and it's extraordinarily important to talk about. And I predict over the next few months, in fact, I know for a fact over the next few months, you're going to see hundreds, if not thousands, eventually, of dissertations that will be proven to be plagiarized. One of the things that we should also talk about is the source of institutions.
I'd like to go back and look through his academic work, see if maybe that was plagiarized.
They're attempting to take off people's names from the diversity, equity, inclusion, so you can't find those dissertations. So that's one problem. So you have the problem of plagiarism, the problem of university administrators knowing that their faculty have plagiarized. So instead of saying, okay, let's hold people accountable, they're hiding the dissertations and they're making it almost impossible to get those. And then
so if we don't find the amount of plagiarism that we said that we're going to find in the academy, it's because of the conspiracy. He's already like laying the groundwork for the conspiracy theory that he's going to posit if they don't find the rampant plagiarism that he says that they're going to find.
I really don't want to be lost in this conversation tonight is that there are disciplines that are not rigorous, they're not sound, they're putting forth ideological conclusions, and then those conclusions are going on to inform public policy. And so in the conversation tonight, I don't want that to get lost because plagiarism is just one part of the whole scale corruption.
What kind of disciplines are you talking about?
As a general rule, anything that ends in the word studies. Black studies, gay studies, women's studies, Chicano studies, Latin.
Oh, yikes. Well, thanks, dude. Well, we know what's up here. So he's a philosopher, and I guess they didn't call it philosophical studies.
Studies, indigenous studies, these are fact studies. These are activist disciplines that promote certain views of reality and then go on to inform public policy.
Right. On the topic of plagiarism, just before we move down the line, as it were, you know something about it because that's one of the ways they sort of convicted you, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm a plagiarist.
Oh, wait a minute. Did he plagiarize some shit? It's real easy, actually. If you use somebody else's work in your work, you just fucking put it in brackets and cite who the fuck it is. Like, people do it all the time. That's like how the sausage gets made, baby.
I'm a plagiarist. I have plagiarized. I admitted to plagiarize. I plagiarized Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf.
You should probably explain the context.
Okay. So as part of the exposure of academic corruption, we wrote 20 bogus, ridiculous, and quite frankly, vile papers, and we submitted them to a number of journals, the top in their fields. And among the papers is we plagiarized a chapter from Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. We had two. One, and we took out Jew, and we put in white male, and then the other one we just rewrote some of the words. And just
rewrote some of the words.
Just for the record, they brought me up on charges of plagiarism. I completely pled guilty to it, and then it's black and white. I plagiarized, and then they said you're not guilty. And the reason, the reason that they said that I was not guilty is because if they found me guilty, then the journal would have published Mein Kampf. The very journals whose narratives they want to forward about power dynamics and race, and for example, racism being the ordinary, everyday state of affairs, etc. So I'm the only plagiarist.
Like even the way, even in his own telling of the story, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
So far.
Can I just jump to James? Because I feel like you will have a different sense of where the problem is. I mean, if I ask you that question, what are you most worried about? What do you think the problem is?
Well, I don't think it's plagiarism. I mean, that's been the immediate trigger for this debate and a lot of the discussions in the United States. I mean, I think they're sort of missing the target if plagiarism is the key theme. Nor is it, I think, a problem of really affirmative action. I mean, the problem was that the president of Harvard was the top DEI commissar, head of the Office for Diversity, which she basically spearheaded and was the architect of, that she was appointed in the first place to run the most influential, arguably the most famous and the wealthiest university in the world. So that's sort of, I think, getting the plagiarism stuff.
Wait a minute, why was that a problem? They had to appoint somebody, and they seem to have fucking promoted from within. If your problem was just that she ran the diversity department beforehand, well, and your problem maybe not even with her and her qualifications. Maybe your problem is that there's a diversity fucking department at all or something, I guess.
And maybe there is a big problem in the United States and higher education in the UK. My suspicion is probably not. I mean, I think the sort of deterrence, the incentive structures are sort of well in place, and I think plagiarism is not really the problem. I mean, inevitably, in a culture that prizes intellectual conformity and groupthink, everything is plagiarized. In a way, you have to sort of signal conformity to an ideology by taking out the kind of the woke idiolect and, you know, always looking.
Now, explaining the same concept in your own words is the opposite of plagiarism.
Sociology through an increasingly narrow ideological prism. So to that extent, you know, there's an awful lot of plagiarism around. Or at least there's not very, very little originality, very, very, very little novelty.
So what is the problem?
Well, I think the key problem, I mean, it depends what you think universities are for. I mean, in terms of research and education, it's clear there is a serious problem. And it's not just because of the Mickey Mouse disciplines that are sort of engulfing
the Mickey Mouse disciplines.
Less selective and
this guy must be a real hit with his colleagues.
The universities in the UK and the US. It's also the sort of the main disciplines are being corrupted. So, I mean, you know...
Which ones are the main disciplines?
Is too strong a word, but I mean, take something like, I don't know, law, you know, jurisprudence. There's going to be a dominant orthodoxy in favour of some kind of judicial activism. The idea this sort of will be producing...
now law?
In law who will basically think of the courts as an agent for a certain kind of social engineering. Now, there's a perfectly reasonable case to be made for that within academia. But what you're seeing is a sort of spiraling effect on those kinds of issues. And similarly in English, you know, there's clearly a preponderance towards, even in the very best English departments, there's clearly a sort of leaning towards looking at literature through post-colonial lenses or through feminist lenses or trans lenses, whatever it might be.
Sure.
And now that's okay. You don't really want to root all of that out, but it's clear that the balance is out of kilt.
Is it the uniformity that troubles you, or is it the sense that there's not neutrality, that it's sort of become activist as an institution?
So it's a mixture of both. I mean, so institutions are dropping their commitment to neutrality on issues that really they shouldn't be expressing any views on at all. So we saw this over in the wake of the George Floyd affair in 2020. Long statements of kind of institutional genuflection. Fast forward, the Gaza last year, in October, then there's a kind of deafening silence by contrast. So there's an abandonment of institutional neutrality, and in the sort of pursuit of these kind of organising horizons of diversity, inclusion and equality, there is clearly a chilling effect on those who would want to challenge research looked at through those lenses.
So there's a kind of official version of what...
But there's a difference. Hold on. I'm not part of academia, but I would think that there's a big difference between challenging, like via peer review or whatever, somebody's work, the work that they did, versus just suggesting that the whole field, the whole endeavor therein is bad because it makes you sad that we do black studies. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that's the same thing. You can definitely challenge someone's work. That's what peer review is supposed to be for. That's the whole point of it, is for other people to, take a look at what you're doing, challenge it, hopefully make you better at it. That's not the same. People are supposed to do that within the field. Absolutely. He, I think, means that he's from outside of this field, that he thinks that that he should just be able to challenge the whole notion of something like queer studies or gender studies. I mean, he didn't say that, but it seems like that's what he's saying.
Deviants from it are excluded.
Absolutely. Heterodoxy is effectively held in deep suspicion. It doesn't pay to be heterodox, as used to be the case. And so
for you, it's not a left-right thing for you, especially that you think it's become kind of captured by far left ideology, especially even though you might be considered a conservative. You would like to see more balance or more diversity of opinion. Yeah,
absolutely right. I mean, the group, there are sort of tipping points, and once groupthink gets beyond a certain, I think an intellectual culture where you've got maybe a spread of 70-30 on a contentious issue would be absolutely fine. But where you're getting, 80-20, now you can suddenly get a sort of spiraling effect where the minority is just not, the social costs are just going to be too high to speaking out.
Oh, could you
And that
give an
really
example?
matters where the issues are of clear public
Give an example. Just any example. Just give an example.
concern. So just think of the last few years of COVID and lockdowns, climate, race, gender critical beliefs, etc., bioethics. All of these areas are the kind of the no-go areas, precisely the areas that universities should be steering the public on. Difficult ethical areas, difficult technical areas, and that's the public university is failing in its job to the taxpayer and to the general public to perform that vital service.
So you're doing your bit in real life here, because you've come out as a conservative pretty much, I would say, in the last
Stop using that
3 years
terminology.
in particular, and yet you're at the heart of a very prestigious institution.
Like anybody that couldn't have figured out this guy was a Tory was an idiot.
What's life like as a dissident from the dominant orthodoxy?
Life is pretty good, actually. I mean, I should say I've had no problems at all from the university itself, as is often the case. I mean, there's a kind of disproportionately vocal minority among the students, among some colleagues, and so there are kind of tantrums about various things I do, or various people I invite, or various things I say.
Jordan Peterson, for example.
Right, but
why invite Jordan Peterson to your classroom?
Point after a number of colleagues counselled him, it was important to get him back, and so
It's not cancelled. He just wasn't invited.
No adverse consequences at all to doing that, and a number of other things that I've done have passed without much consequence, and so
they don't tut in the corridors and in the cloisters. You don't get
no
eye
doubt.
rolls in the canteen.
I'm sure I get an awful lot of that, but I'm pretty immune to it. And what the interesting thing is that there isn't, the groupthink is kind of illusory. I mean, what you've got is the radical vocal minority, and then you've got then you have, two conservatives maybe. I mean, I could count on one hand the number of people I've met in Cambridge who sort of share my basic outlook on the world. But you've got this middle silenced majority who just really want to get on with their lives and don't.
They're not silenced.
Are worried about.
I think like what he's. I think he's talking about people who do mostly just want to go to work and live their lives and shit. But they're not silenced. They're just not fucking engaged. They're just not that engaged politically. That's different than being silenced. Nobody's silencing them. They just choose. A lot of people just choose not to be super politically engaged. They vote every 4 years or whatever it is, and that for them that's fine, and that's fine.
And we'll keep quiet. But so you basically, it's the classic. It's a classic example of all totalitarian regimes. There's a brittleness to them. I mean, if you think of, I don't know, if you imagine yourself being in Berlin in early 1989 and telling somebody, in 10 months' time, all of this is going to be over, nobody would have believed you. But the ideology was very brittle. No one really believed it. And so the sort of, stated preferences are very, very different from revealed preferences when you get these sorts of purity spirals. And so it could be that this comes to an end, and if it does come to an end, that it would come to an end very quickly.
So there's some hints of optimism there that we'll come back to. Kathleen, you've obviously been at the sharp end of this. I think it'd be really helpful just to start with that. The experience you had at Sussex was a sort of ideology and an enforcement of that ideology that led to you not being able to work there anymore. Was it groupthink? Was it meanness? What was it?
The other thing that's going on here that I don't like is these are professors, and it's crazy that they've all been essentially asked to do something they don't want to do at their job. And I'm like, oh, cry me a fucking river. Like, because people are asked to do things all the time they don't want to do at their job. That's most of what most people's jobs are.
It's very much like James just said, I think, although it's impossible to get people to say this, but I think most people were either neutral or vaguely for me. Like, occasionally people would come up and whisper.
What? Most people? Like, you're just guessing. You're just fucking vibes based. I actually don't know in the UK whether most people were neutral, for her, against her. I think most people in the UK still don't know who the fuck she is. The only reason we know who the fuck she is because we're like too online, terminally online.
to me, keep going, things like that. But there's a small group of extremely vocal,
students,
narcissistic academics who are on social media a lot and at
like
meetings a lot, and there's no disincentive for them to be absolutely vile about me to their students, to colleagues, to administrators, and to whip up student sentiment against me.
I think those students protested you all by themselves. I think the students that you're talking about, they do in fact have agency and decided to speak up about what you're doing and saying, lady.
And I mean, I think listening to what you've both said, I think the real thing that we need to sever is the link between activism and careerism in universities. It is 100% in your interest, or it was the last time I was in a university, to be an activist, even in the promotion criteria. And I'm talking about the university I was familiar with, but in the promotion criteria, it would say, are you a good ally? You could get points in your promotional case by showing how moral you were and how you thought the right things. And
well, no, it's are you a good ally isn't about what you think. It's about how you behave. And I don't think they were asking, are you a good ally? I think the question would probably be more along the lines of, are you doing right by the students, no matter their religious or racial background, something like that. It would be some question. It wouldn't be like, are you woke or whatever the fuck she's talking about here.
So that obviously that's going to, it's going to deter heterodoxy because it's going to end up having professional consequences, not just social consequences. And so much of academic.
But again, in other jobs that aren't like at a university, yeah, if you like say a bunch of bigoted shit to the other people that are there, be they people you work with, contractors who were there, your boss, customers, yeah, you're gonna get fired. I don't understand why like being a university professor would be any different.
Is based on relying on other people to let you through the gate. If you need your stuff in prestigious journals, you need to get the right sorts of grants, you need to be on the right sorts of committees. So you can't afford to alienate people in those ways if you're young and you want to get on.
Lady, that's how any bureaucracy works. Yeah, if nobody in the bureaucracy likes you, it's going to be hard for you to fucking climb up in that bureaucracy. Harder for you to get higher up in that layer cake. I don't know, fucking, I guess it sucks, but like, it's just the way bureaucracy is. And
that's important.
That's what people mean when they talk about capture, then.
Yeah.
Somehow that a group had worked out the mechanics of taking over an institution.
Sort of instinctive. I don't think they actually thought it through very carefully. I think it's just that...
Well, if they haven't thought it through very carefully, maybe they just don't like you, and they didn't have to think too much about it. They think, they're like, oh, fucking Professor Stock. God damn it, is she coming?
There's many other layers to this which make it very complicated. So one is that a lot of academics are unable to face confrontation and really just want to get on with their 16th century manuscript or whatever and don't want to be on social media. Most academics aren't on social media and they're like, oh, I can't go on there. But that leaves the field free for a few people to be extremely influential. There's also a genuine fear of upsetting students for a number of reasons. One is
because these people are fucking teenagers. The undergrads are mostly teenagers, and your job is to educate, but your job is also to like be chill and like a professional. Your job and not piss off all the fucking students. Yeah, if all the students hate you, it's going to be hard to teach, lady. Like, what the fuck?
Fees, like, since the caps came off, all universities are in competition with each other. Some universities are undoubtedly about to go under financially. I'm sure Cambridge and Oxford, different kettle of fish, but in the universities I was familiar with, people were terrified for years. We couldn't even photocopy. There was just budgets being cut all the time. And then there's also a massive spectre of student mental health because nobody, including in the government, can work out whether we're in loco parentis, whether we're supposed to be looking after anxious students. There's no, as far as I can see, there's no...
You are a trusted elder. If you are a professor teaching classes, you are a trusted elder for most of these students. That is your role. You're also an educator. But yeah, you were a trusted elder. Yes, absolutely. Yep, these kids, they're 18, or I think in the UK at 16 you become an adult in a lot of ways. But they're still teenagers, and you should be a trusted elder. That's part of your role as a professor. If you're not doing that, then you're a shit professor.
You're fit to study, so you can come with massive mental health problems and just be waved through, and then arrive in the classroom saying, I am too anxious to be asked questions, I can't talk about, I don't want to hear about this very difficult subject, I want a trigger warning. And if you're desperate for their fees, there's no incentive to actually manage that situation.
How many times has this happened? Like, in the way she's like describing these things in a very caricatured way, where I don't think it's like one particular thing comes up and then like a student's like, oh, I don't want to answer your question, I have anxiety. I think it's gonna these things are probably like a preponderance of events.
Well, and there's more and more and more students with severe mental health problems, or just diagnosed mental health problems like anxiety and depression, which you might think are normal for students, but you just can't tell anymore. No one can tell. So
actually,
that's dissuading heterodoxy and, saying the truth quite often.
That also muddies, because this is sometimes cast as being a kind of right-wing attack on the universities. In fact, Harvard and those institutions now, that's very much the line they're taking, which is this is a conservative conspiracy campaign against us.
Yes.
So in a way, what you're saying is the opposite. That
Harvard had the kind of money, too, and the kind of institutional power. They could have stood tall for that lady and been like, we're not firing her. I don't give a fuck. She is qualified. She will not be leaving until she chooses to leave, or if some other thing comes up.
Marketization of universities, which is a conservative type of idea, you might think, has kind of backfired.
Well, I completely think that's true. I mean, you just, in my particular area of expertise, which is sex and gender, in the way that HR was just taken over by...
Oh, Peter Boghossian thinks that your whole area of expertise is just a non-valid thing to study, your gender studies. Peter Boghossian thinks that you shouldn't even been at the university in the first place. At least that's what I would infer from what he said earlier.
Kite mark schemes and award ceremonies, and every university saying, we want to get into the top 100 Stonewall. And basically, as other people have said, getting Stonewall to mark your homework, handing out your policies to Stonewall, and Stonewall come back and said, no, you've mentioned the word woman here. Your changing rooms aren't inclusive. Have you considered your teaching material? And in my university, it said in the...
Well, that have you considered your teaching material is actually a valid question for any administrator at a university. They're like, no, I haven't thought about that much. And you're like, really? What the fuck do you do all day?
Policy that trans people had to be represented in a positive light or something. That was built into one of our policies. So no other group was treated like that. And no one seemed to question it, because the thing is, it appeals, or they think it appeals to students. They think we want to appeal to idealistic young queer people, particularly in Brighton. So let's just go with it. And everybody else is going with it anyway. So who would we be to?
So it's partly the students. The tail wagging the dog.
It's not even, again, it's not that students are demanding this.
But you just said they were.
And again,
that specific students were. Now you're saying they're not?
And the very same dynamic of a few people being very vocal, universities not having the mechanisms to do proper polling of what students think. So they have, in my view, ridiculous kind of student reps, which again produces a careerist, activist type of student who comes into the meeting with the lecturers and says, we want this, we want that, we want trigger warnings, this person's transphobic.
Is that what the student reps are doing? Like the student, if there's like students at the table for like major decisions at the university, are they just coming in there and like reading off a list of demands? Is that what's happening? I'm fairly confident that's not what's happening.
And the teachers just go, oh, okay, and change all their policies.
One thing we haven't talked about that much, I really want to come on to what might be done about all of these interlocking issues, but it feels like we have to spend a moment on the recent controversy around pro-Palestinian protests, what should be allowed.
Oh, here we go. This is going to be allowed.
That's really what
horrible.
Started this whole recent wave and ultimately led to the resignation of Claudine Gay and the others. Does anyone here share my slight concern that by sort of weaponizing the same tactics that the left have been using to silence opinions they find unsavory on this question of Israel. Sort of the political right has now lost the argument as well, and it sort of establishes a new principle that nasty things shouldn't be said on universities. What's your view, Pete? Do you think, has that been a step forward or a step back, that whole free speech question?
So just to rewind that tape a bit, that's not why Claudine Gay resigned.
Right.
Claudine Gay resigned because unquestionably she is a plagiarist. She took ideas that were not hers and she made them as if they were hers. And it's worth noting, she also plagiarized her acknowledgments, which is utterly astonishing. Okay, now back to the issue.
But the energy was kicked off by that hearing.
That's
correct.
correct.
Why there was such focus on the plagiarism issue. So it was sort of secondary effect.
Wasn't this another case where ghouls on Twitter basically told us exactly what they were going to do? They were going to try to tar and feather this lady with plagiarism accusations to get her to resign. And then they did exactly that, and nobody even seemed to notice that they just told us what they were going to do.
And so the problem is that universities, and again, I can't speak to this context, but it does seem to be in the Anglosphere, led by the United States.
What the fuck is the Anglosphere? I mean, I think I know what he means. He means like where they're fucking, I guess, British people.
Is that if they never said anything, if they never involved themselves in politics, if they didn't have any diversity, equity, and inclusion statements, there would be no problem with those responses. But the problem is that they selectively they decided what they wanted to choose, and then they were vocal about it. And the principle in which they invoked was an oppressor oppressed. And so they view Jews as whites, they view Israel as a colonial power, as a manifestation of colonial values by white people against dark people or brown people. Also within this worldview, they view Muslims as oppressed. And so there's a whole...
Well, the United States and the United States' allies been bombing the shit out of majority Muslim countries for most of my life. Bombs are a form of oppression, I think.
Worldview that goes into understanding why they said what they said. So if you understand and you've read the literature, then it makes perfect sense for why they would say that.
But it's just been this huge backlash, hasn't it? And there's a guy called Christopher Rufo in the US who's been extraordinarily successful, directly campaigning against these figures. And he overtly says he's using the playbook that he's learned off the left. And I'm wondering here, is there a danger that all these institutions, any sense of neutrality is just lost, and it becomes whichever political campaign is more effective captures them?
I mean, I share your worry, Freddie, and the irony here is, if you're looking back at those hearings, I mean, their responses, is it appropriate to be calling for X, Y, Z and saying, well, it depends on the context, was basically right, because yes, it will depend on the context. If, it's one thing going on a pro-Palestine march on October the 6th. It's very different going on a pro-Palestine march on October the 8th outside the Israeli embassy, firing fireworks at it and praying and celebrating.
Right, but this didn't happen on a campus. This didn't happen on campus. This happened in front of an embassy.
Being a kind of state of jubilation. I mean, calling for from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. So it does depend.
But that's like America, from sea to shining sea. Everybody has a version of doesn't everybody have a version of that shit? Some fucking patriotic thing that talks about that. This land is your land, this land is my land, all that shit. Like, doesn't everybody have some fucking version of that shit?
Context. But freedom of speech within the law is it's a well accepted paradigm, and what's legal and what's illegal speech has also been pretty clear.
Should you be allowed to say from the river to the sea in Cambridge?
On October the 8th, when the blood of the victims has barely run cold, I'd say there's a much stronger case for censoring that kind of behaviour.
Wait, why?
And
but people knew what was about to happen. Like, they knew people knew. People were like, uh-oh. All BB and the Likud party, they're gonna overreact to this. And overreact was I think just what people would have thought would have been a basic overreaction would have been a far less of a bloodbath than what we've seen.
It's clearly intimidating Jewish students. There's a stronger case for it than if that kind of behavior is happening on October the 6th.
Now? Today?
Now, I'd be very, I absolutely, students should be able to speak freely on the issue now.
Wait a minute, why is it different? The students, everybody knew what was about to happen. Well, we didn't, I didn't think it was going to be like what we've seen, right? But people knew it was about to happen.
And I think one's got to be very, very, very.
Yeah, somebody in chat said Israel uses that for their own stuff. Like I said, I think a lot, not every, but every culture, but I think like America is from sea to shining sea. Doesn't it mean the same fucking thing? Isn't that the same thing? And it doesn't say like we'll be, and it also says that they'll be free. That's like a very American sounding thing to me.
Not to be heavy-handed in the other direction. Yeah. So I share your concerns, and I think their actual responses in that hearing, they were smugly delivered, but basically correct.
Smugly delivered. Why was it smug? I watched parts of that. We didn't run it on the show because I try to not. I mean, everybody's talking about that, and there are people who are much better informed than I am, and my position is pretty clear, I think, but we're not spending a lot of time on that. But I think the only reason he thinks they were smug is because they were black. And I think the word he might be looking for here is uppity.
Kathleen?
I agree with James, and I've written as much in a couple of places. The principle of academic freedom is it can't just be invoked every time you agree with the sentiments being suppressed. You're setting a precedent if you just dive in, and I was absolutely.
But so my understanding of academic freedom is you are free to pursue your work academically. I don't think part of academic freedom, like in her case, is just being a shit to the students. I'm not sure that's what people mean when they say academic freedom. Or in Peter Boghossian's case, my understanding is that he skirted some regulation around doing. Research or testing on human subjects, and I'm not sure that falls under the category of academic freedom.
I was quite shocked by some people that would call themselves allies of mine and have gone on and on and on about freedom of speech, apparently forgetting everything they just said on even October the 8th, actually. Context is everything. It isn't the same. I don't have a dog in the fight, but it is not the same thing to say Palestine should be free is not the same thing as calling for genocide. There's about 10 moves potentially there that you would have to do.
Damn, look at her being the reasonable one, being like, actually saying Palestine should be free isn't really call for genocide, which is true.
And you can't just shut that down and say this means that, and you can't say that. And the reason I think that is because I'm very, very familiar with people taking my speech when I say trans women are men, for instance, and inferring all sorts of.
There's no inference there. Actually, you're just being needlessly disrespectful. Actually, you're just fucking again. When she did all this was in the context of trans people who were like undergrads, a lot of them, who were protesting her because she's supposed to be a trusted adult at the university. That's what these people are supposed to be. Yeah, they're a fucking professor. They're supposed to be doing research, all this, but you want a good relationship between the faculty and the students. It's important. So yeah, actually, nobody's arresting you for saying that, but the university could be like, listen, you're being an asshole. Stop being an asshole.
Terrible, immoral content from it, without any consultation of the context and what I meant by it and why I said it and so on. And
it almost felt reminiscent of when you were.
Yeah, I can see the move. I can see, and it's quite strange watching people who are very, very clear to support me when I say
I'm a gender critical person, suddenly saying, but when they say this, they really mean this. Well, I've written a whole book about meaning and intention, and I think intention has got something to do with it, and you can't foreclose intention just by looking at very...
Oh, shit, why do I agree with her on? Like, this is the only thing I agree with her on. Yeah, I'm like, I don't care that much about intention. Like, I get mad at people when they're like, bad faith. I'm like, shut the fuck up. But the thing about it is, the only reason I think she's doing this is because she feels like almost she has to if she wants to seem consistent. But again, that's me trying to divine her intent.
So yeah.
you remain a free speech reader now.
I'm afraid I do, yeah.
I want to think about if there is... The question we put on the poster is, are the universities doomed? Is university doomed as an institution? And I have a feeling, Pete, that you think the answer might be yes. So give us the case for burn them all down, the institution is...
Oh, there's no case for that.
Saving.
Too bad we don't have 2 hours for that question. So I do believe that they should be all burned down, and here's why. So first of all, I just want a quick show of hands. I'm just curious. The number of the percentage of people who hold PhDs who have plagiarized their dissertations, who thinks it's under 5%? Raise their hand. One in the whole room. Wow. Who thinks it's under 20%? Okay, that's the mode. Most people. Okay, so I mentioned before at the start, it's worth talking about. So you have people who have cheated. You have the institutions who have protected people who have cheated. You've had institutions and administrators who have been hoodwinked by monstrously idiotic ideas. There's literally nothing interesting about these ideas. And they're put forward by profoundly mediocre minds. Okay.
But this idea that like he is the arbiter of who is smart, like I think I'm pretty good at like learning new things. I pick up on things pretty quick, but I'm not going to run around and like, I haven't decided that that's what intelligence is, right? If other people are slower to learn, I'm not like, oh, this is a mediocre mind or this person's stupid, because I don't know what that person might be good at that I'm not, or where that person might excel that I might have some problems or whatever, because I just don't know. And so like this idea that we have great minds and like mediocre minds or whatever, this is you end up in some pretty fucked up places. Like when that's like your starting point, you end up in some pretty fucked up places.
Problem in the corruption of academic literature. Let's see if I can do this in a minute. In order to get promoted, you need to publish. In order to publish, this goes back to Freddie, your comment about institutional capture. What does it mean to be captured? In order to publish something, you have to, peer-reviewed publishing, it's not the same as publishing as UnHerd or the Telegraph or what have you. It's an article that your peers who are experts in the field view as worthy to be added to the canon of literature. So as a general rule, 7 papers in 7 years, in general, will get 1 tenure. Okay. You cannot publish a paper, particularly in the humanities, that runs contra to the narrative. So there's very specific power relations, gender relations, very specific dynamics. Kathleen is very familiar with those in her discipline.
But then, okay, first of all, I don't think this is true. There are probably tons of people writing papers that are disagreeing with conclusions that other people have made in their papers and stuff. But I don't think what this guy doesn't. What I'm guessing this guy doesn't like is that that if people think what you're saying is bullshit and they're your peers, that they get to be like, well, this is bullshit. And then people are like, oh, well, your peer review was pretty bad. You might want to go back to the drawing board, friendo.
Okay. So you have entire bodies of academic literature that have been corrupted. You cannot publish something that goes against the narrative. You cannot publish, for example, something that says, the number of unarmed black men shot by police is proportionate to the number of... Roland Fryer tried something similar to that at Harvard.
But that's because proportional... Notice how he stopped? Check this out. Watch this.
the number of unarmed black men shot by police is proportionate to the number of Roland Fryer tried something.
Proportional to the number of, and then he stopped. You hear that? Because he couldn't finish the sentence. There was no way to finish that sentence.
Something similar to that at Harvard. And by the way, he was the victim of Claudine Gay's witch hunt. Okay, so you have bodies of literature.
Was his data inaccurate? Proportional to the what? Like he didn't finish. I don't know what you're saying this guy tried to publish on. And he stopped himself because either one, he doesn't know what the guy tried to publish, or two, he does know what the guy tried to publish and knows that it's incorrect, or that it plays games with the numbers
that have been corrupted. 50%, really think about this. 50% of papers in psychology, it's called a replication crisis, cannot be replicated. 50%. Are you kidding me? You mean half of the stuff, of the work that people go into a clinical setting with, the tools that they go to help people, you mean half of those can't be replicated?
So, the Matt Brown from Decoding the Gurus actually has talked a bit about the replication crisis, and it is a real thing. But I listened to Matt Brown talk about it, and it does not sound like Peter Boghossian. And Matt Brown is a pretty well respected psychologist in Australia, and he does a lot of work on like gambling and like policy around gambling and gambling addiction and the psychology of that stuff there. And he was talking about it, and it was actually kind of interesting to listen to him talk about it, because I'd only heard these wackadoodles talk about it, but listening to somebody a little bit more measured, and somebody who's currently working in the field of psychology in addition to being a university professor, listening to him talk about it was a lot different, and it made a lot more sense. And he had his critiques were, he didn't think it was good, but he had some explanations for why it's the case sometimes. It was just overall a pretty good listen. I wish I remembered. I think it might have been in one of their like Decoding Academia series or whatever, where they talked about Matt's academic career. I thought it was really interesting, and I learned some stuff I didn't know, actually. But he didn't just say, half of the stuff isn't, and it's not that it can't be, it's that it has not been replicated. And he was saying that there's like a disincentive to, like, in some cases, to do work that someone's already done. Like if you're trying to become prominent, you want to do new work. So there's some disincentive there, and that it's hard to get. Sometimes it's hard to get grant money if you're trying to like retread something that somebody already like did, especially if it was recent. There's all kinds of institutional problems there, but it's not just that these people are all wackadoodles and that they made it all up or whatever.
Okay, let that percolate. That's astonishing. And we're teaching those, and I go all around the world and I say, who's familiar with the replication crisis? Who's a psychology major? Who's familiar with the replication crisis? Nobody has any idea what it is. Nobody. I probably asked that question.
Like if I know what the fuck the replication crisis is, and I'm 20, how far out? 24 years out of academia entirely?
At times at universities, clueless. You can mitigate that very quickly by putting it in the syllabus to be in class. Look, we don't know if this is true. It's our best guess. 50% chance. You're flipping the dice. Okay. So
no. Just because 50% of them haven't, just because something hasn't been replicated doesn't mean it's a flip of the coin. That's what peer review is for. Peer review is part of the process, and replication should be part of the process. And I do think that it's important that that gets fixed. Primarily so that people like this can't like dishonestly use it. No. He's like, now it's just a flip of the coin because, I don't know, half of the stuff can't be replicated. That doesn't make sense. Even on its own terms, that doesn't make sense.
Institution's doomed. You have a situation in which my personal feeling is that there are around, I could be wrong about this, we'll know soon enough, about 10% of academicians have plagiarized in the humanities, probably lower in the sciences. In the sciences, you probably see data fraud as more of a phenomenon. Okay. The reason that there's a legitimation crisis, that's Habermas's 1973 phrase from a paper, the German philosopher. The reason that there's a crisis in the legitimacy of institutions is because those institutions are not worthy of our trust. they've betrayed public trust. They've become.
So this is starting to get a little bit into the Scientology territory, and I'm surprised Scientology hasn't jumped on this shit, to be honest. I don't know if the institution of psychology, to the extent that it exists as like a monolith or whatever, is worthy of my trust or not. If I go to see a fucking psychologist, I care whether or not I think that person is worthy of my trust. But they're not an academic; they're doing clinical work or even just talk therapy. So
knowledge production are fundamentally compromised. And when they're fundamentally compromised, it's like, was it the horse in Alice in Wonderland that runs off furiously in all directions, right? So,
but what are you going to? I mean, obviously, by saying burn them all down, we're not actually talking about physically burning them down. What is it that you suggest we do in that situation?
well, there's only one thing. Look. It is better for people. One thing we can do is we can start plugging vocational schools, right? But it is better for people. Dan Dennett picks up a famous phrase: "If it's not worth doing, it's not worth doing well. If it's not worth doing, it's not worth doing well."
Ooh, I think Dan Dennett has had some nasty things to say about these intellectual dark web people before. I could be mistaken. I think it was Dan Dennett who was like, these guys are just jerks.
It is not worth learning a process that takes you away from reality. You would be far better if you literally looked at a wall. You would be. Than if you learned something that took you...
But he's sitting there shitting all over the woman in the middle's field.
Reality and
she's the gender
in social civil society.
So you have no hope that this problem can be corrected, that these institutions can start becoming more worthwhile again?
It's no. So not only do I have no hope, but if you want any kind of hope, you have to burn them down. So what is the alternative to that? The alternative is, and Kathleen is also a founding faculty fellow at the University of Austin and other places.
Yeah, but I don't agree with you.
Okay.
The University of Austin, if the professors here were good enough for the kids at Epstein Island, they're good enough for your kids too.
I'll tell you my solution. My solution is, rather than we have institutions, academic institutions that are ideology mills. Their primary function, and their primary function of people who teach there, is to discharge some deranged ideological mission.
So start new ones.
So start new ones, but it's insufficient to start new ones. New ones in a capitalist framework can put pressure to leverage themselves for other institutions to have some kind of a corrective mechanism. But right now, there's no corrective mechanism. So you have to start new institutions. Stephen Blackwood was here when we last did our event. He started Ralston College. More institutions are popping up. But right now, what we have is a situation that is literally teaching people that the foundations of Western civil society are cancerous and poisonous, and that thinking has metastasized throughout the system.
James, you'd probably agree with the last bit there, to do with forgetting the canon of Western civilization. I'm guessing you don't want to burn Cambridge down, given that they're young.
Absolutely not, and yet the canon is under fire. But it's worth pointing out that, I agree with Pete, the replication crisis, which goes back, 2005, when that guy first published his paper that said, more than half of studies in the social sciences were not replicable. That's a
not replicable, or we're not replicated.
The social sciences. Now that's
because replicable means it's possible to replicate, and if they're not replicated, that means they have not been replicated. So it seems like a weird thing to quibble about, but it actually matters which it is.
A lot of the other, lots more to the humanities than just the social sciences, who are kind of both pretending to be scientists and pretending to be kind of in the humanities. It's not. I don't think it is as bad in, say, English and in history and in law and in philosophy. But the dynamics are still the ideological sort of constrictions are in place. But the replication crisis is not primarily ideologically driven. It's the incentive structures that are, and the
it's a function of university architecture.
But plot for us how we get from here to a.
This guy at the center, just to right of the center, was about to say what I was saying, is that the incentive structure is fucked up. It's because you want to publish something new, you don't want to it's hard to get funding to retread old ground.
Well, so I think we're already in a good place, in the sense that I think there are extramural bits of infrastructure that can pretty well replicate what we want the social sciences to do for the public square. I mean, here in London, I think it's the same in Washington. It's really think tanks. So a lot of the...
Wait, what? You think tanks? You think think tanks are just going to replace like the fucking humanities department at a What the fuck? The Heritage Foundation? Cato? What the fuck?
Really sort of policy sort of salient projects in the social sciences that have got real sort of cut through can be replicated by think tanks for public policy and private companies for STEM. And that's already happening, I think, to some degree. So and now parallel universities are starting new institutions. I mean, all strength to you guys, what you're doing at the University of Austin and Woolston.
And your fucking world-renowned fucking phrenology department or whatever.
And you see this sort of pressure occurring in the early 19th century when Oxford and Cambridge had a total stranglehold, and other universities started to sort of set up.
Just want to push you a little bit. I know you have to, you are representing Cambridge at this discussion, and I don't expect you to be disproportionately critical of them, but do you think there are serious issues, even in universities like Cambridge, or do you think we're fine?
I think we're in a much better place than, say, Harvard or the big Ivies. I mean, Harvard is really a hedge fund with a university attached. It's got $50 billion under assets.
Look, I mean, he's not wrong there, but well, Harvard's still a pretty good university academically. But I mean, he's not wrong that the endowments of these big legacy Ivy League universities in the United States are actually kind of a problem because they should be spending that money actually.
Endowment, I think, is about $8 billion, and with that, we still managed to get to pretty much. I think we were, last year top of one of the two big university rankings, but we're much more responsive to public criticism, and being poorer, more exposed to legal liability, and will be very interesting to see when the new Freedom of Speech Higher Education Act starts really kicking in August. What effect that's going to have on the intellectual climate within the universities. I mean, I'm quietly hopeful that it will have a meaningful impact. Now,
do you see what you're doing, which is to be a bit more vocal about your ideas, even if they don't go along the current of prevailing opinion? Do you think that's part of the remedy here?
I think so. More people need to speak out, and more people need to be confident in not just talking about free speech, but actually exercising their rights to free speech. And certainly those who've made it into the institutions, I think, have a special moral obligation to, test received wisdom and to be heterodox, not just for the sake of it, but where they've got heterodox views and to speak out confidently, because...
But your job isn't to express your personal views. That's not the job of academia and research. Your job isn't to give your opinion. That's my job, right? My job is to give my opinion. This guy's an academic. His job, he can give his opinion, but that's not his job.
Or you're in that sort of awful twilight zone of the the postdoc between kind of very kind of precarious existence as an academic looking for a job and somebody who's won the lottery ticket and got into the institution. There's clearly pressure to conform. And there's clearly a lot of gatekeeping at applications and job appointment panels.
This guy works at Cambridge and is complaining about gatekeeping. Get the fuck out of here. They opened the gate for you, friendo.
The prescription. Kath, I want to ask you, if we've had a conversation here before, and it struck me then that you were extraordinarily generous about the institution that frankly treated you appallingly. Both
I don't think they'd say that.
I'm not trying to get sued for libel. This is the UK, friendo.
Thank you.
How can you, is it right that you feel still defensive in a way of universities, even the one that you left?
No, not really. But I do feel defensive of philosophy. And I don't think I agree with you, Pete, that there's sort of bad ideas that we need to root out directly because they're just obviously false and, you'd be better off looking at a wall than these ideas, because I think you get rid of enormous parts of the history of philosophy if you start going down that route. I think philosophy is, I mean, the question is, what is reality? And in a way, that is what even gender studies academics are trying to answer. It's still a philosophical impulse. It's,
yeah, she caught on to this. She was like, wait a minute, what this guy's saying is just that my whole field of endeavor was useless.
Things as axiomatic that they should be questioning and all that, but they are still trying to engage in important metaphysical thoughts that I think we shouldn't just dismiss as ridiculous, in a sort of brute empiricist kind of way. So what I think we need to do is act more indirectly to try and get the quality of thought. I mean, if we're assuming that
the quality of thought, here we go again. No, who decides what the fuck? The quality of thought.
Research, because we could actually decide that they're not. Most research produced in the humanities doesn't get read by anybody. Not really, literally, like two people read the average.
0 to 1 citations for the average.
And it's a preposterous system. It really is. You work for 3 years, you get multiple edits, you get multiple rejections. Eventually, it gets published and no one reads it. So we
okay. I mean, that's the fucking okay. So what? Like, yes.
About that, but assuming you are trying to produce quality researchers in the humanities, then obviously you want to improve the quality, so you need to sever the link between activism and careerism. You need to develop internal norms somehow which say, no, you can't just go on the internet and produce an ad hominem character assassination of the person that you disagree with intellectually.
Wait a minute, but what about fucking this whole freedom of speech thing you were saying before? Wait, what the fuck? And I don't know what they mean by ad hominem. Do they mean do they mean character assessment? I think this person's full of shit, because that's not really might even not be an ad hominem attack. A lot of stuff, it gets confused. It gets real confused here, because the ad hominem fallacy is pretty simple, right? Like a simple one, they could be like, oh, you're a 47-year-old man. What do you know? Well, that's the ad hominem fallacy, right? That's saying that I don't know what I'm talking about because of something intrinsic about me. They could just be like, I think you're an idiot and you don't know what you're talking about. Well, they've probably insulted me, but that is not the ad hominem fallacy. They just think I'm an idiot and that I don't know what I'm talking about. And it's fine. Actually, either is fine. I don't really care.
You have to stick to the arguments. Maybe just ban them from social media. I don't know, but something has to be done to kind of get...
Wait, what? Now she wants people banned from social media? This is dumb. This lady has not thought this through at all.
This kind of knee-jerk moralizing and preening and narcissistic posturing that goes on, that's really partly the problem. You can get a lot of social capital very quickly in universities through very shallow intellectual moves. So I don't know how exactly we get those norms back.
Wait, how do you...
but I don't think
those are what you think are very shallow intellectual moves. What if somebody's like, well, this person's obviously a piece of shit? Like, okay, now what is that, shallow intellectually? I mean, sure, I guess they didn't like say it with a pocket watch in their hand or something.
This whole body of thought is illegitimate. The problem isn't necessarily directly that those ideas are there, it's that no other ideas are allowed in. That you have to kind of, as you've said, work within these incredibly narrow parameters as the rules of the game as a starting point, or you won't get anywhere. And that is anti-intellectual.
And final word before we go to our small break, a word about the students.
Are they going to have a cocktail party right in the middle of this?
Yeah. You've written for us about how you think the kids are all right.
Yeah, I do. I really do.
How so?
Well, because they're the same as they always have been. They're the same as they were when you were younger. They're naive and idealistic and curious, and many of them are clever. I mean, it's possibly true that too many of them are doing, they're not in the right subjects because there was a massive expansion of the universities, and people ended up doing things that perhaps they weren't best suited to, but they're still trying, and they're still really argumentative. It's this small number of people are allowed to chill the general environment. It's the same dynamic outside universities in every institution there is, pretty much.
Yeah, it's a bureaucracy. Yeah, like they're describing, like, I guess it sucks kind of, but yeah, if the people in the bureaucracy don't like you, it's kind of hard to get ahead. I don't know what to tell you.
So we have to free them somehow. We have to allow them to speak their mind, because I do think that they are frightened now, very frightened of saying what they think. And that's a terrible position to be in.
But you just said they shouldn't be allowed to. What the fuck, dude? She just contradicted herself, like just in like a minute.
Person.
Well, if they think, they should be allowed to say what they think, but they shouldn't be allowed to say that someone else is full of shit. It's like a one-way street version of free speech.
Free the students and save the universities. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 30 minutes to do this. So we're going to take a very short 10 to 15 minute break. Do get a drink if you want one, or do whatever you need to do. Downstairs is open as well as here. If you're watching online, get your questions ready and Flo will ask them. So see you in exactly 15 minutes for the group discussion. Thank you.
We'll do the group discussion during the post game, everybody. Kind of boring. Thanks, live viewers, for sticking it out. I think the question part might be a little more lively here. I just like at the end, Kathleen Stock sort of gave away the game, right? Because she was like, well, people shouldn't be silenced, but also they should be silenced. Like, well, people shouldn't be able to call me an idiot, but I should be able to say what I think. But that person that called you an idiot thinks you're an idiot. So they're just saying what they think. This all just fucking collapses in on itself when you think about it, just for even 5 fucking seconds. If you think about it from the point of view that none of these people are a victim and that everybody's out there, nobody actually has to shut the fuck up. No matter how much people will tell you to shut the fuck up, if you probably should, doesn't mean you gotta. And I think these people really don't like the shut the fuck up part of all of this. And, free speech, hate to be the one to tell people this, it includes the freedom for someone to tell you to shut the fuck up, or that you can go fuck yourself. So any version of that, actually. So again, thanks for listening to the podcast. If you're interested in the rest of the show, patreon.com/echoplex, $5 or more, or eplex.store. Or if you're a cheapskate, I don't really mean that. You can just email me. You can find my email. Email me. I'll send you the MP4 of this. No problem. I'm not actually paywalling a fucking MP4 over $5 a month. That's weird. Anyway, this is Boomers by Periscope. I'm going to change the contents of my drink, change the lighting here in the studio, and we'll be back for Red Light.